Feel free to post any comments here and we will get to them as soon as we can. And I just wanted to let you know that we are reading today Chapter 3 of Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. Chapter 3 is on faith. The previous book we read in our book club was Master Key to Riches, and Applied Faith was one of the main chapters as well. This is such an incredible chapter and such an incredible book. And without further ado, right before I start, I want to recommend that you hear this, because you need to know that you're going to receive from this book by the actual words that are in it, but then you are also going to receive from the frequency at which this book was written and the intention by which it is set. So I intend here any errors that we read only give you the greater ability to receive epiphanies in your evolution of thought, because ultimately Andrew Carnegie and Napoleon Hill said that is a big part of it. Knowing that your thoughts are the thing that you need to evolve and act on. So, like and subscribe to join our daily book readings. Man's Search for Meaning is one of the next ones on deck. We will be finishing Think and Grow Rich this upcoming week. Chapter 3, Faith. Visualizing and believing in the attention. We are reading. I'll start again. Hopefully this records correctly. Chapter 3, Faith. Visualizing and believing the attainment of desire. The second step to riches. Faith is the head chemist of the mind. When faith is blended with the vibration of thought, the subconscious mind instantly picks up the vibration, translates it into its spiritual equivalent, and transmits it to infinite intelligence. As in the case of prayer, faith, love, and sex are the most powerful of all major positive emotions. When the three are blended, they have the effect of coloring the vibration of thought in such a way that it instantly reaches the subconscious mind, where it is changed into its spiritual equivalent, the only form that induces a response from infinite intelligence. Love and faith are psychic, related to our spiritual side. Sex is purely biological and related only to the physical. The mixing or blending of these three emotions has the effect of opening a direct line of communication between the finite thinking mind and infinite intelligence. How to develop faith. I'm reading Think and Grow Rich right now by Napoleon Hill, and this is Chapter 3, Faith. How to develop faith. Faith is the state of mind that may be induced or created by affirmation or repeated instructions to the subconscious mind through the principle of autosuggestion. If you like and subscribe, you'll be able to join our daily lives and be a part of our book club. As an illustration, consider the purpose for which that you are presumably reading this book. The object is naturally to acquire the ability to transmute the intangible thought impulse of desire into its physical counterpart, money. By following the instructions laid down in Chapter 3 on autosuggestion and Chapter 11 on the subconscious mind, you may convince the subconscious mind that you believe you will receive what you ask for. It will act upon that belief, passing back to you in the form of faith, followed by definite plans for procuring your goal. The method by which one develops faith, where it does not already exist, is extremely difficult to describe, almost as difficult, in fact, as it would be to describe the color of red to a blind man. Faith is a state of mind that you may develop at will. After you have mastered the 13 steps of riches in this book, making repeated affirmation to your subconscious mind is the only known method of developing the emotion of faith voluntarily. Perhaps the meaning may be made clearer through the following explanation as to the way people sometimes become criminals, stated in the words of a famous criminologist. When people first come into contact with a crime, they abhor it. If they remain in contact with crime for a time, they become accustomed to it and endure it. If they remain in contact with it long enough, they finally embrace it and become influenced by it. This is the equivalent of saying that any impulse of thought, which is repeatedly passed on to the subconscious mind, is finally accepted and acted upon. The subconscious mind proceeds to translate that impulse into its physical equivalent by the most practical procedure available. In connection with this, consider again the statement: all thoughts which have been emotionalized, given feeling, and mixed with faith begin immediately to translate themselves into their physical equivalent or counterpart. The emotions or the feeling the emotions or the feeling portion of thoughts are the factors that give thoughts vitality, life, and action. The emotions of life, love, and sex, when mixed with any thought impulse, give it another action. Then any of these emotions can be singly not only thought impulses which have been mixed with faith, but also those that have been mixed with any of the positive emotions or any of the negative emotions may reach and influence the subconscious mind. Yeah, so it's both negative and positive, obviously. From this statement, you will understand that the subconscious mind will translate a thought impulse of a negative or destructive nature into a physical equivalent just as readily as it will act upon thought impulses of a positive or constructive nature. This accounts for the average phenomenon so many millions of people experience. Pardon me. This accounts for the strange phenomenon that so many millions of people experience, referred to as misfortune or bad luck. Millions of people believe themselves doomed to poverty and failure because of some strange force over which they believe they have no control. They are creators of their misfortunes because of this negative belief, which is picked up by the subconscious mind and translated into its physical equivalent. This is an appropriate place at which to suggest again that you may benefit by passing on to your subconscious mind any desire that you wish translated into its physical and monetary equivalent. In this state of expectancy, pardon me, your belief or faith is the element that, oh, there we go. This is an appropriate place to which suggest again that you may benefit by passing on to your subconscious mind any desire that you wish translated into its physical monetary equivalent in a state of expectancy or belief that the transmutation will actually take place. There is nothing to hinder you from deceiving your subconscious mind when given when giving it instructions through autosuggestion, as I deceived my son's subconscious mind to make this deceit more realistic. Thank you, the crazy one. To make this deceit more realistic, conduct yourself just as you would if you were already in possession of the material thing which you are demanding when you call upon your subconscious mind. The subconscious mind will transmute into its physical equivalent by the most direct and practical media available any order given to it in the state of belief or faith that the other will be carried out. Surely enough has been stated to give a starting point from which one may, through experiment and practice, acquire the ability to mix faith with any order given to the subconscious mind. Perfection will come through patience and practice. It cannot come by merely reading instructions. If it is true that one may become a criminal by association with crime, and this is a known a known fact, it is equally true that one may develop faith by voluntarily suggesting to the subconscious mind that one has faith. The mind comes finally to take on the nature of the influences that dominate it. Understand this truth, and you will know why it is essential for excuse me, why it is essential for you to encourage the positive emotions as dominating forces of your mind and discourage and eliminate negative emotions. It's like the main thing. A mind dominated by positive emotions becomes a favorable abode for the state of mind known as faith. A mind so dominated may at will a mind so dominated may at will give the subconscious mind instructions which will accept and act upon immediately. Faith is a state of mind which may be induced by autosuggestion. All through the ages, religious leaders have admonished struggling humanity to have faith in this, that, and the other dogma or creed, but they have failed to tell people how to have faith. They have not stated that faith is a state of mind and that it may be induced by self suggestion in language any normal human being can understand. I will describe all that is known about the principle through which faith may be developed where it does not already exist. Hey, what's going on, Crystal? We're just reading Faith, chapter by Napoleon Hill and Think and Grow Rich. Have faith in yourself, faith in the infinite. Before we begin, you should be reminded again that faith is the eternal elixir which gives life, power, and action to the impulse of thought. The foregoing sentence is worth reading a second time and a third and a fourth. It is worth reading aloud. If the starting point of all accommodation of riches. Faith is the starting point of all accommodation of riches. Faith is the basis of all miracles and mysteries that cannot be analyzed by the rules of science. Faith is the only known antidote to failure. Faith is an element, the chemical, which, when so I have a book here. Someone was looking to purchase it, and I just got word. So, faith is the starting point of all accumulation riches. Faith is the basis of all miracles and mysteries that cannot be analyzed by the rules of science. Faith is the only known antidote to failure. Faith is the element. Faith is the element, the chemical, which, when mixed with prayer, gives one direct communication with infinite intelligence. Faith is the element that transforms the ordinary vibration of thought created by the finite mind of man into a spiritual equivalent. Faith is the only agency through which the cosmic force of infinite intelligence can be harnessed and used. Every one of the foregoing statements is capable of proof. The proof is simple and easily demonstrated. It is wrapped up in the principle of autosuggestion. Let us center our attention, therefore, upon the subject of self-suggestion and find out what it is capable of achieving. It is a well-known fact that one comes finally to believe whatever one repeats to oneself, whether the statement be true or false. If a person repeats a lie over and over, the lie will eventually be accepted as truth. Moreover, it will be believed to be the true Moreover, it will be believed to be the truth. Each of us is what we are because of the dominating thoughts we permit to occupy our minds. Thoughts are October, I guess. Thoughts which are mixed with any of the feelings or emotions constitute a magnetic force which attracts from the vibrations or the ether other similar or related thoughts. A thought thus magnetized with emotion may be compared to a seed that, when one small seed becomes countless millions of seeds of the same brand. The other is a great comic mass of eternal forces of vibration. It is made up of both destructive vibrations and constructive vibrations. It carries all the way vibrations of feet to stumbling. Okay. Excuse me. The ether is a great cosmic mass of eternal forces of vibration. It is made up of both destructive vibrations and constructive vibrations of prosperity, health, success, and happiness. It does this just as surely as it carries the sound of hundreds of orchestrations of music and hundreds through. From the great storehouse of the ether, the human mind is constantly attracting vibrations that harmonize with that which dominates the mind. Any thought, idea, plan, or purpose which one holds in one's mind attracts the vibration of the ether, a host of its relatives. It adds it adds these relatives to its own force and grows until it becomes the dominating, motivating master of the individual in whose mind it has been housed. Now, let us go back to the starting point and find out how the original seed of an idea, plan, or purpose may be planted in the mind. The information is easily conveyed. Any idea, poem, or purpose may be placed in the mutual. From the great storehouse of the ether, the human mind is constantly attracting vibrations that harmonize with that which dominates the mind. Any thought, idea, plan, or purpose which one holds in one's mind attracts the vibrations of the ether, a host of its relatives. It adds these relatives to his own force and grows until it becomes the dominating, motivating master of the individual in whose mind it has been housed. Now, let me take a look here. Now let us go back to the starting point and find out how the original seed of an idea, plan, or purpose may be planted in the mind. The information is easily conveyed. Any idea, plan, or purpose may be placed in the mind through repetition of thought. This is why you are asked to write out a statement of your major purpose or definite chief aim. Commit to the Commit to the memory and repeat it in audible words day after day until the vibrations of sound have reached your subconscious mind. We are what we are because of the because of the vibrations of thought. Good. We are what we are because of the vibrations of thought that we pick up and register through the stimuli of our daily environment. Resolve to throw off the influences of any unfortunate environment and to build your own life to order. Taking an inventory of mental assets and liabilities, you will discover that your greatest weakness is lack of self confidence. The handicap can be surrounded. We are what we are because of the vibrations of thought that we pick up and register through the stimuli of our daily environment. Resolve to throw off the influences of any unfortunate environment and to build your own life to order, taking an inventory of mental assets and habits. You will discover that you will discover Taking an inventory of mental assets and liabilities, you will discover that your greatest weakness is lack of self confidence. This handicap can be surmounted. The application of this principle may be made through a simple arrangement of positive thought impulses started in writing, memorized, and repeated, and they became a part of the working equipment of the subconscious faculty of your mind. Self confidence formula. Number one, I know that I have the ability to achieve the object of my definite purpose in life. Therefore, I demand of myself persistent, continuous action toward its attainment. And I were I hear and now promise to take such action. To realize that ancien Realize the dominating thoughts of your mind will eventually reproduce themselves in outward physical action and gradually transform themselves into physical reality. Therefore, I will concentrate my thoughts for 30 minutes daily upon the task of thinking of the person I intend to become, thereby creating in my mind a clear mental picture of that person. I know through the principle of autosuggestion that any desire I persistently hold in my mind will eventually seek expression through some practical means of attaining the object. Therefore, I will I will devote 10 minutes daily to demanding of myself the development of self-confidence. I have clearly written down a description of my definite chief aim in life. I will never stop trying until I have developed sufficient self-confidence for its attainment. 3. I know through the principle of autosuggestion that any desire I persistently hold in my mind will eventually seek the expression through some practical means of attaining the object. Therefore, I will devote 10 minutes daily to demanding of myself the development of self confidence. And a Gushinai's wedding. Number 4, I have clearly written down a description of the definite chief aim in life. I will never stop trying until I have developed sufficient self confidence for its attainment. Number 4, I have clearly written down a description of the definite chief aim in life. I will never stop trying until I have developed sufficient self confidence for its attainment. I fully realize that no other woman or possession can long endure unless built upon truth and justice. Therefore, I will engage in no transaction that does not benefit all whom it affords. I will succeed by attracting to myself the forces I wish to use and the Number 4, I have clearly written down a description of a definite chief aim in life. I will never stop trying until I have developed sufficient self confidence for its attainment. 5, I fully realize that no wealth or position can long endure unless built upon truth and justice. Therefore, I will encourage no transactions that does not benefit all whom it affects. I will succeed by attracting to myself the forces I wish to use and the cooperations of other people. I will induce have you I will cause others to believe in me because I will believe in them and in myself. I will sign my name to this formula, committed to memory, thoughts, and actions so that I will become a self-reliant and successful person. Underpinning this formula is a law of nature that no one has yet been able to explain it. It has baffled the scientists of all ages. Psychologists have named this law autosuggestion and let it go at that. The name by which one calls this law is of little importance. The important fact about it is it works of the glory and success of humankind. If it is used constructively, if found a significant truth, those who go down in defeat and end their lives in poverty, misery, and distress do not or do so because of negative application of the principle of autosuggestion. The cause may be found in the fact that all impulses of thought have a tendency to clothe themselves in their physical equivalent. The subconscious mind, the chemical laboratory in which all thought impulses are combined and make ready for an Englishman in New York. That song's playing in my head. Subconscious mind, the chemical laboratory in which all thought impulses are combined and made ready for translation into physical reality, makes no distinction between constructive and destructive thought impulses. It works with the material we feed it through our thought impulses. The subconscious mind will translate into reality a thought driven by the pages of the medical history are rich with illustration of cases of suggested suicide. A person may commit suicide through negative suggestion as just as effectively as by any other means. In a Midwestern city, bank official named Joseph Grant borrowed a large sum of the bank's money without consulting it to. One afternoon, the bank examiner came and began to check the accounts. Grant left the bank and took a room in a local hotel. When they found him 3 days later, he was lying in bed, wailing and moaning, repeating over and over these words, "My God, this will kill me. I cannot stand the disgrace." In a short time, he was dead. The doctors pronounced the case one of mental suicide. Just as electricity will turn the wheels of industry and provide useful service if used constructively, or snuff out life if wrongly used, so will the law of autosuggestion lead you to peace and prosperity, or down the value of misery, failure, and death. It all depends on your degree of understanding and application of it. If you feel your mind will fear, doubt, and disbelief in your ability to connect with and use the forces of infinite intelligence, the law of autosuggestion will take this spirit of unbelief and use it as a pattern which your subconscious mind will translate into its physical equivalent. This statement is as true as the statement that 2 and 2 are 4. Like the wind that carries one ship east and another west, the law of autosuggestion will lift you up or pull you down according to the way you set your sails of thought. The law of autosuggestion, through which any person may rise to altitude of achievement that stagger the imagination, is well described in the following verse. If you think you are beaten, you are. If you think you dare not, you don't. If you like to win but you think you can't, it almost certain it almost certainly it is almost certain you won't. If you'd like to win but you think you can't, it's almost certain you won't. If you think you'll lose, you're lost. For out of the world we find success begins with a person's will, it's all in the state of mind. If you think you are outclassed, you are. You've got to think height rate. You've got to be sure of yourself because you can never win a prize. Life's battles don't always go to the stronger or faster. Okay. If you think you're outclassed, you are. You've got to think high to rise. You've got to be sure of yourself before you can ever win a prize. Life's battles don't always go to the stronger or faster man, but soon or late, the one who wins is the one who thinks he can. Observe the words which have been emphasized and will catch the deep meaning of power. Observe the words which have been emphasized, and you will catch the deeper meaning of the poet had it in mind. Somewhere in your makeup, perhaps in the cells of your brain, lies sleeping the seed of achievement. If aroused and put into action, this would carry you to heights such that observe the words which have been emphasized, and you will catch the deep meaning of the poet had in mind. Somewhere in your makeup, perhaps in the cells of your brain, lies sleeping the seed of achievement. If aroused and put into action, this would carry you to heights such as you may never have hoped to attain. Just as a master musician may cause the most beautiful strains of music to pour forth from the strings of a violin, so may you arouse the genius which lies asleep in your brain and cause it to drive you upward to whatever goal you may wish to achieve. Abraham Lincoln was a failure at everything he tried. Until he was well past the age of 40. He was a Mr. Nobody from nowhere. Until a great experience came into his life, aroused the sleeping genius within his heart and brain, and gave the word one of its really great men. The experience was mixed with the emotion of sorrow and love. It came to him through Anne Rutledge, and the only woman he ever truly loved. It is a known fact that the emotion of love is closely akin to the state of mind known as faith. Love comes very near to translating one's thought impulses into their spiritual equivalent. During this research, the author discovered from the analysis of the work achievements of hundreds of men are outstanding or sitting outstanding. It is a known fact that the emotion of love is closely akin to the state of mind known as faith. Love comes very near to translating one's thought impulses into their spiritual equivalent. During his research, the author discovered from the analysis of the work and achievements of hundreds of men outstanding accomplishment that there was the influence of a woman's love behind nearly every one of them. The emotion of love in the human heart and brain creates a favorable field of magnetic attraction. This causes an influx of the higher and finer vibrations that are afloat in the ether. Let us consider the power of faith as it was demonstrated by a man well known to all of civilization, Mahatma Gandhi of India. In this man, the world experienced one of the most astounding examples of the possibilities of faith. Gandhi wielded more potential power than any man living in his time, and this desired the fact that he had one of the orthodox tools of power, such as money. He didn't even own a suit of clothes, but he did have power. How did he come to that power? He created it out of his understanding of the principle of faith, and through his ability to transplant that faith. Never in usum povosquiva. Gandhi had no idea. Gandhi wielded more potential power than any man living in his time, and this despite the fact that he had none of the orthodox tools of power such as money, battleships, soldiers, and materials of warfare. Gandhi had no money, he had no home, he didn't even own a suit of clothes, but he did have power. How did he come by that power? He created out of his understanding of the principle of faith, and through his ability to translate that faith into the minds of 200 million people. Gandhi accomplished through the influence of faith something that the strongest military power on earth could not and never will achieve through soldiers and military equipment. He accomplished the astounding feat of influencing 200 million minds of coalesce and move in unions as a large meter. Gandhi accomplished through the influence of faith something that the strongest military power on earth could not, and never will achieve through soldiers and military equipment. He accomplished the astounding feat of influencing 200 million minds to coalesce and move in union as a single mind. What other force on earth except faith could do as much? In the mid 20th century, Martin Luther King Jr., through his deep faith in his belief in human rights and dignity for all people, led men and women of all races, religions, and beliefs to join in this struggle for civil rights. His dream that people will not be judged by the color of their skin, but the content of their character has not been fully realized. So maybe we'll just have to water those in the back. In the mid 20th century, Martin Luther King Jr., through his deep faith in his belief in human rights and dignity for all people, led men and women of all races, religions, and beliefs to join in the struggle for civil rights. His dream that people will not be judged by the color of their skin, but also Connecticut. We recommend of the future will be human happiness and contentment. When this state of mind has been attained, the production of well taken care of itself more effectively. The watchword of the future will be human happiness and contentment. When this state of mind has been attained, the production will take care of itself more effectively than anything ever accomplished where people did not and could not. Because of the need for faith and cooperation in business and industry, it will be both interesting and profitable to analyze a particular event. This provides an excellent understanding of the method by which industrial leaders of business accumulate great fortunes by giving before they try to get. The event chosen for the illustration dates back to 1900, when the United States Steel Corporation was being formed. As you read and the story keep in mind these fundamental faces, and you will understand how ideals have been converted into huge fortunes. First, the huge United States Steel Corporation was born in the mind of Charles M. with his idea that he formulated a plan for the transformation of his idea into physical and financial reality. Fourth, he put his plan into action with his famous speech at the University Club Fifth. At the University Club Fifth. He applied and followed through on his plan with persistence and backed it with firm decision until it had been fully carried out. Sixth, he prepared the way for success by a burning desire for success. If you have, if you have, just a moment. He applied the following through on his plan with persistence and backed it with firm decision until it had been fully carried out. Sixth, he prepared the way for success by a burning desire for success. If you have often wondered how great fortunes are accumulated, this story of the creation of the United States Steel Corporation will be enlightenment. If you have any doubts that people can think and grow rich, um, I don't think so. What's up? John Lowell in New York. If you have any doubt that people can think and grow rich, this story should dispel that doubt because in it you can plainly see the application of a major portion of the 13 principles described in this book. John Lowell in the New York World Telegram, with whose courtesy it is here reprinted, dramatically told his astounding story of a pretty after dinner speech for $1 billion. When on the evening of December 12th, 1900, some 80 of the nation's financial nobility gathered in the banquet hall of the University Club on Fifth Avenue to do honor. When on the evening of December 12th, 1900, some 8 of the nation's financial nobility gathered in the banquet hall of the University Club on Fifth Avenue to do honor to a young man from out of the West, not half a dozen of the guests realized they were to witness the most significant episode in American industrial history. J. Edward Simmons and Charles Stuart Smith, their hearts full of gratitude for the lavish hospitality bestowed on them by Charles M. Schwab during a recent visit to Pittsburgh. He had arranged the dinner to produce the one of our reunions. After a pretty after dinner speech for $1 million. $1 billion. J. Edward Simmons and Charles Stuart Smith, their hearts full of gratitude for the lavish hospitality bestowed on them by Charles M. Schwab during a recent visit to Pittsburgh, had arranged the dinner to introduce the 38-year-old steelman to Eastern banking society. But they did not expect him to stampede the convention. They warned him, in fact, that the blossoms within New York's stuffed shirts would not be responsive to oratory, and that if he didn't want to bore the Stillmans and Hermans and Vanderbilts, he had better limit himself to 15 or 20 minutes of polite vaporings and let it go at that. Even John Pierpont Morgan, sitting on the right, had even John Pierpont Morgan, sitting on the right hand of Schwab, as became his imperial dignity, intended to grace the banquet table with his presence only briefly, and so far as the press and public were concerned, the whole after affair was of so little moment that no mention of it found its way into print the next day. So the two hosts and their distinguished guests are on their way through the usual 7 of 8 courses. There are little courses, conversion, and what there was, if it was restrained. Few of the brokers had met Schwab, whose career had flowered along the banks of Mongolia, and no one. So the two hosts and their distinguished guests are there and ate their way through the usual 7 or 8 courses. There was little conversation, and what there was of it was restrained. Few of them bankers and brokers had met Schwab, whose career had flowered along the banks of the Mongolia, and none knew him well. Right. So the two hosts and their distinguished guests ate their way through the usual 7 or 8 courses. There was little conversation, and what there was of it was restrained. Few of the bankers and brokers had met Schwab, whose career had flowered along the banks of the Monongahela, and none knew him well enough. But soon enough after a But before the evening was over, they, and with them Money Master Morgan, were to be swept swept off their feet, and $1 billion baby, the United States Steel Corporation, was to be conceived. It is perhaps unfortunate for the sake of history that no record of Charlie Schwab's speech at the dinner ever was made. He repeated some parts of it later during a similar meeting of Chicago bankers, and still later when the government brought suit to dissolve the Steel Trust. He gave his own version from the witness stand of the remarks that stimulated Morgan into a frenzy of financial activity. It is probable, however, that it was a homely speech, somewhat ungrammatical for the niceties of language. Aside from that, it had a galvanic force and effect upon the 5 billion of estimated capital that was represented by the dinners. After it was over and gathering was still under its spell, although Schwab had talked for 90 minutes, Morgan led the orator to a record recessed window where Schwab had talked for 90 minutes. Morgan led the orator to a recessed window where Schwab were dangling their legs from the high, uncomfortable places. He repeated some parts of it at a later date during a similar meeting of the Chicago bankers. And still later, when the government brought suit to dissolve the Steel Trust, he gave his own version from the witness stand of the remarks that stimulated Morgan into a frenzy of financial activity. It is probable, however, that it was a homely speech, somewhat ungrammatical for the niceties of language never bothered Schwab, full of epigrams and threaded with wit, but aside from that it had a galvanic force and effect upon the 5 billion of estimated capital that was represented by the dinners. After it was over and the gathering was still under its spell, although Schwab had talked for 90 minutes, Morgan led the orator to a recessed window where, dangling their legs from the high, uncomfortable seat, they talked for an hour. The magic of the Schwab personality had been returned on full force, but what was more important and lasting was the full-fledged, clear-cut program he laid down from the agritourism. He laid down for the arrangement of steel. The magic of Schwab personality had been turned off full force, but was more important and lasting was the full-fledged, clear-cut program he laid down for the aggrandizement of steel. Many other men had tried to interest Morgan in slapping together a steel trust after the pattern of the biscuit, wire and hoop, sugar, rubber, whiskey, oil, chewing gum combinations. John W. Gates, the gambler, had urged it, but Morgan distrusted him. The Moore boys, Bill and Jim, Chicago stockbrokers, who had glued together a match trust and a cracker corporation, had urged it in field. Albert H. Gary, the sanctimonious tri-lawyer, wanted to foster it, but he hasn't big enough to be impressive until Schwab's eloquence took J.P. Morgan to the heights from which he could visualize the solid results of the most daring financial understanding ever conceived. In my mind, the project was regarded as a delirious dream of easy money crackpots, the financial magnetism that began a generation ago to attract themselves of small and sometimes inefficiently managed companies into large and competition crushing combinations had become operatives in the steel world through the devices of that jovial business practice business pirate John W. Gates. Gates already had formed the American Steel and Wire Company out of a chain of small concerns, and together with Morgan had created the Federal Steel Company, the National Tube, and the American National Companies, where two more Morgan concerns and the Moore brothers had forsaken the match and cookie business to form the American Good Old Nickel Group. That's what it looks like. The financial magnetism that begins a generation ago to attract themselves with small and sometimes inefficiently managed companies into large and competition crushing. Yep. National Tube and American Bridge companies were two more Morgan concerns, and the Moore brothers had forsaken the match and cookie business. There's this. But by the side of Andrew Carnegie's gigantic vertical trust, a trust owned and operated by 53 partners, those other combinations were picayune. They might combine to their heart's content, but the whole lot of them could make a dent in the Carnegie organization, and Morgan knew it. The eccentric old Scot knew it, too. From the magnificent heights of Skibo Castle, he had viewed first the amusement and then the resentment, the attempts of Morgan's smaller companies to cut into his business. When the attempts became too bold, Carnegie's temper was translated into anger and retaliation. He decided to duplicate every mill owned by his rivals. Hitherto, he hadn't been interested in wire pop, hoops, or sheet. Instead, it was content to sell such companies the raw steel and let them work it into whatever shape they wanted. Now, with Schwab as his chief and able lieutenant, he planned to drive his enemies to the wall. So if so it was that in the speech of Charles M. Schwab, Morgan saw the answer to his problem of combination. A trust without Carnegie, giant of them all, would be not Decidă po prostu about that. Now the Schwab, as his chief and able lieutenant, he planned to drive his enemies to the wall. So it was that in the speech of Charles M. Schwab, Morgan saw the answer to his problem of combination. A trust without Carnegie, giant of them all, would be no trust at all. A plum pudding without the plums, as one writer said. Schwab's speech on the night of December 12, 1900, undoubtedly carried the inference, though not the pledge, that the vast Carnegie enterprise could be brought under the Morgan tent. He talked of the world. Schwab's speech on the night of December 12, 1900, undoubtedly carried the inference through not the pledge that the vast Carnegie enterprise could be brought under the Morgan tent. He talked of the world future for steel, of organization for efficiency or specialization, of the scrapping of unsuccessful mills, and concerning of effort on the flourishing properties of enemies in temporary enemies, let's say, in the ore traffic of economies in overhead and administrative adventure of capturing foreign markets. More than that, he told the buccaneers among them wherein lay the errors of their customer piracy. Their purposes he interfered. More than that, he told the buccaneers among them wherein lay the errors of their customary piracy. Their purposes, he inferred, had been to create monopolies and raise prices and pay themselves fat dividends out of the privilege. Schwab condemned the system in his heartiest manner. The short-sightedness of such a policy, he told his hearers, lay in the fact that it restricted the market in an era when everything cried for expansion. By cheapest, the costs of steel had had argued an ever-expanding market would be created, more use for the steel would be devised, and goodly portion of the world trade could be captured. Actually, though the though he did not know it, Schwab was an apostle of modern mass. Um, no, to można to też. So the dinner at the University Club came to an end. Morgan went home to think about Schwab's rosy predictions. Schwab went back to Pittsburgh to run the steel business of Andrew Carnegie, while Gary and the rest went back to their stock market tickers to fiddle around it, anticipation of the next move. It was not long coming. It took Morgan about 1 week to digest the feature of reason Schwab had. The magic of the Schwab personality had been turned on full force, but what was more important and lasting was the full-fledged, clear-cut program he had laid down for the aggrandizement of steel. Many other men had tried to interest Morgan in slapping together a steel trust after the pattern of the biscuit, wire and hoop, sugar, rubber, whiskey, oil, chewing gum combinations. John W. Gates, the gambler, had urged it, but Morgan. The financial magnetism that began a generation ago and sometimes inefficiently managed companies into large and companion crushing combinations had become operative in the steel world through the devices of that jovial businessman pirate John W. Gates. Gates already had formed the American Steel and Wire Company out of a chain of small concerns, and together with Morgan had created the Federal State Steel Company. The National Tube and American Bridge Companies were two more Morgan concerns, and the Moore brothers had forsaken. Bit by the side of Andrew Carnegie's gigantic vertical trust, a trust opened and operated by 53 partners. Those other combinations were picayune. They might combine to. Wait, what? The financial magnetism that began a generation ago to attract thousands of the financial magnetism that began a generation ago to attract thousands of small. All right. But by the side of Andrew Carnegie's gigantic vertical trust, a trust owned and operated by 53 partners, those other combinations were picayune. They might combine to their heart's content, but the whole lot of them couldn't make a dent in the Carnegie organization, and Morgan knew it. The eccentric old Scot knew it too. From the magnificent heights of Skibo Castle, He had viewed first with amusement and then with resentment the attempts of Morgan's smaller companies to cut into his business. When the attempts became too bold, Carnegie's temper was translated into an anger and retaliation. He decided to duplicate every mill owned by his rivals. Hitherto, he hadn't been interested in wire, pipe, hoops, or sheet. Instead, he was convenient to sell such companies the raw steel and let them work it into whatever shape they wanted. Now, with Schwab as his chief and hitherto he hadn't been interested in wire pop. Work into whatever shape they wanted. Now, with Schwab as his chief and able lieutenant, he planned to drive his enemies to the wall. So it was that in the speech of Charles M. Schwab, Morgan saw the answer to his problem of combination. He talked of the world future for steel, of reorganization, for efficiency, of specialization, of the scrapping of unuseful mills, and concerning of effort to the flourishing parties of economies in the order traffic. Of economies in overhead and administrative departments of capturing foreign markets. More than that, he told the buccaneers among them wherein lay the errors of their customary piracy. Their purpose, he inferred, had been to create monopolies, raise prices, and pay themselves fat dividends out of the privilege. Schwab condemned the system in his heartiest manner. The short-sightedness of such a policy, he had told his hearers lay in the fact that it restricted Schwab condemned the system in his heartiest manner. The short-sightedness of such a policy, he told his hearers, lay in the fact that it restricted the market in an era when everything cried for expansion. By cheapening the cost of steel, he argued, an ever-expanding market would be created, more uses for steel would be devised, and a goodly proportion of the world trade would be a nice pamiętka. It was not long coming. It took Morgan about 1 week to digest the feast of reason Schwab had placed before him. When he had assumed himself that no financial indigestion was to result, he sent for Schwab and found that the young man, rather coy, Mr. Carnegie, Schwab indicated, might not like it if he found his trusted company president had been flirting with the Emperor of Wall Street, the street upon which Carnegie was resolved never to tread. Then it was suggested by John W. Gates, the go-between, that if Schwab happened to be in the Bellevue Hotel in Philadelphia, J.P. Morgan might also happen to be there. When Schwab arrived, however, Morgan was inconveniently ill at his New York home, and so one of the aldermen's pressing invitations. Schwab went to New York and presented himself to the door of the financier's library. Now, certain economic historians have professed the belief that from the beginning to the end of the drama, the stage was set by Andrew Carnegie, that the dinner, the famous speech, the Sunday night conference between Schwab and the Money King were events arranged by the canny Scot. The truth is exactly the opposite. When Schwab was called in to consummate the ideal, he didn't even know whether the little boys, as Andrew was called, would so much as listen to an offer to sell, particularly to a group of men with When Schwab was called in to consummate the deal, he didn't even know whether the little boss, as Andrew was called, would so much as listen to an offer to sell, particularly to a group of men whom Andrew regarded as being endowed with something less than holiness. But Schwab did take into the conference with him in his own handwriting 6 sheets of copper plate figures representing to his mind the physical worth and the potential earning capacity of every steel company he regarded as an essential star in the new metal firmament. Four men Foreman pondered over these figures all night. The chief, of course, was Morgan, steadfast in his belief in the divine right of money. With him was his aristocratic partner, Robert Bacon, a scholar and gentleman. The third was John W. Gates, with Morgan, Robert Bacon, a scholar and a gentleman. The third was John W. Gates, with Morgan scorned as a gambler and used as a tool. The fourth was Schwab, who knew more about the processes of making and selling steel than any one whole group of people would. Sanushki. Four men pondered over it. The third was aristocratic partner. With him as his aristocratic partner, Robert Bacon, a scholar and a gentleman. The third was John W. Gates, with Morgan, scorned a gambler and used as a tool. The fourth was Schwab, who knew more about the processes of making and selling steel than any whole group. Throughout that conference, the Pittsburghers' figures were never questioned. If he said a company was worth so much, then it was worth that much and no more. He was insistent, too, upon including in the combination only those concerns he nominated. He had conceived a corporation in which there would be no duplication, not even to satisfy the greed of friends who wanted to unload their companies onto the broad Morgan shoulders. Thus, he left out by design a number of the lawyer concerns upon which the walruses and carpenters of Wall Street had cash-hungry eyes. When dawn came, Morgan rose and straightened back up. Thus he left out by design a number of larger concerns upon which the walruses and carpenters of Wall Street had cast hungry eyes. When dawn came, Morgan rose and straightened his back. Only one question remained. Do you think you can persuade Andrew Carnegie to sell? He asked. I can try, said Schwab. If you can get him to sell, I will undertake the matter, said Morgan. So far, so good. But would Carnegie sell? How much would he demand? Schwab thought. About 320 million. What would he take payment in? Common or preferred stocks, bonds, cash? Nobody could raise a third of $1 billion in cash. There was a golf game in January on the frost-cracking heath of the St. Andrews Links in Westchester, with Andrew bundled up in sweaters against the cold, and Charlie talking volubly, as usual, to keep his spirits up. But no word of business was mentioned until the pair sat down in the cozy warmth of the Carnegie cottage nearby. Then Charlie talking volubly. No word of business was mentioned till they were at the cottage. Then, with the same persuasiveness that had hypnotized 80 millionaires at the University Club, Schwab poured out the glittering promises of retirement and comfort of untold millions to satisfy the old man's social caprices. Carnegie capitulated, wrote a figure on a slip of paper, handed it to Schwab, and said, "All right, that's what we'll sell for." The figure was approximately 400 million and was reached by taking the 320 million mentioned by Schwab as a basic figure and adding to it $80 million to represent the increased capital value over the numerous. Yeah. Later on the deck of the transatlantic liner, the Scotsman said ruefully to Morgan, "I wish I had asked you for 100 million more. If you had asked for it, you'd have gotten it," Morgan told him cheerfully. The 38-year-old Schwab had his reward. He was made president of the new corporation and remained in control until 1930. The dramatic story of big business was included in this book because it is a perfect illustration of the method by which desire can be transmuted into its physical equivalent. I imagine some readers will question and state the statement that a mere intangible desire can be converted into its physical equivalent. Doubtless some will say you cannot convert nothing into something. The answer is in the story of the United States Steel Company. That giant organization was in the mind of one man. The plan by which the organization was provided with the real steel mills that that giant organization was created in the mind of one man. The plan by which the organization was provided with the steel mills that gave it financial stability was created in the mind of the same man. His faith, his desire, his imagination, his persistence were the real ingredients that went into United States Steel. The steel mills and mechanical equipment acquired by the corporation after it had been brought into legal existence were incidental, but careful. This dramatic story of big business was included. Okay. His faith, his desire, his imagination, his persistence were the real ingredients that went into United States Steel. The steel mills and mechanical equipment acquired by the corporation after it has steel mills and mechanical equipment acquired by the corporation after it had been brought into legal existence were incidental, but careful analysis will disclose the fact that the appraised value of the properties acquired by the corporation increased in value by an estimated $600 million by the mere transaction that consolidated them under one management. In other words, Charles M. Schwab's idea, plus the faith with which he conveyed it to the minds of J.P. Morgan and the others, was marked for a profit of approximately $600 million, not an insignificant sum for a single. What happened to some of the people who took their share of the millions of dollars of profit made by his transaction in a matter with which we are not now concerned? The important feature of the astounding achievement is that at is that next actually in other words, what happened to the sum what happened to some of the people who took their share of the millions of dollars of profit made by this transaction is a matter with which we are now with we are which with which we are not now concerned. The important feature of the astounding achievement is that it serves as unquestionable evidence of the soundness of the philosophy described in this book. Moreover, the practicality of the philosophy has been established by the fact that the United States Steel Corporation prospered. It became one of the richest and most powerful corporations in America, employing thousands of people, developing new uses for steel, and opening new markets, thus proving that the $600 million in the form of thought is a good investment. Prevalence improvements. Znaczy 4. Riches begin in the form of thought. The amount is limited only by the person in whose mind the thought is put into motion. Faith removes limitation. Remember this when you are ready to bargain with life for whatever it is that you ask as your price for having passed this way. Remember also that the man who created the United States Steel Corporation was practically unknown at the time. He was merely Andrew Carnegie's Man Friday until he gave birth to his famous idea. After that, he quickly rose to a position of power, fame, and riches. Now, for another example of how faith in an idea made millions for one man and thought it helped countless others increase their wealth. Sir John Templeton is a man with great faith in his talent to make sound and profitable investments. Templeton was better than most people at investing money because people often made investments based on emotion and ignorance and not common sense. He left that by using his skill in investing, he could not only provide a needed service to the small investor, but made a good deal of money for himself as well. To accomplish this, he started a group of mutual funds to manage other people's money. This was a pioneering project, as mutual funds were a relatively new concept at the time. Templates handed them over. Project as mutual funds were a relatively new concept at the time. Templeton honed that concept into what it is today. He reminisced that at the Templeton Growth Fund's first annual meeting, the participants consisted of John Templeton, one part-time employee, and one shareholder. We held the meeting in the dining room of a retired General Foods executive to save money. The Templeton funds now have more than 6,000 employees worldwide and $36 billion in assets. Driving that growth is the Templeton Group's well-earned reputation as the premier fund group for investing. A $10,000 investment in the Templeton Growth Fund 40 years ago is worth $3 million today. By the time he retired and sold in Templeton, let's say. Driving that growth is the Templeton Group's well-earned reputation as the premier fund group for investing. A $10,000 investment in the Templeton Growth Fund 40 years ago is worth $3 million today. By the time he retired and sold his Templeton Group fund interests in 1992, estimated at $400 million, John Templeton estimated that he had helped 1 million people make money in addition to his own success. Wow, that took me so long to read. It was stories, but I guess it's late as well, and I really wanted to do this today, and I was kind of piecing out a little bit there. I appreciate y'all. Hope you have the best day ever, and like and subscribe so that you can join our daily live readings. See you tomorrow.